Good evening and welcome to Take and Make Aprons with Attitude. My name is Megan Bachman and I'm the Adult Services Manager at the Coshocton Public Library. I'd like to thank you for joining me tonight. We're going to have an amazing craft together. For those of you who this is your first library program, a warm welcome to you. For those of you who are returning for another fabulous adult program at the Coshocton Public Library, thank you for your continued support. Tonight's program is based off of the Coshocton Public Library's Database of the Month. This database is the Hobbies and Crafts Reference Center that is available to all Coshocton Public Library card holders through the Ohio Web Library. If you've not yet checked out Hobbies and Crafts Reference Center, I encourage you to do so. If you need help, please contact the library. A member of the reference department is happy to assist you. Now on to our craft supplies. In your bag, you should find a one-size-fits-most canvas apron. These aprons have all been pre-washed using a perfume and dye-free detergent. In an email sent to you prior to the program, it is recommended that for best results, you iron your apron before the program. However, if you didn't iron, don't worry. Your apron will still be a success. Also in your bag, you should have a foam brush. The foam brush will be used for applying paint to our apron. Speaking of paint, you should have paint of the color of your choosing included in your bag. You should also have checked out a stencil for tonight's program from the Coshocton Public Library location. Prior to returning the stencil to the bag and to the library, please be sure to clean the stencil with a non-abrasive, gentle cleaner. Some additional supplies I recommend but are not included in your bag are tape to help hold our stencil in place. Also, a tablecloth or a paper bag to lay underneath your apron as we stencil. Doing so will help prevent bleeding and damage to the surface underneath. In addition, you might also want to wear an old t-shirt and have a lot of paper towels handy. An additional supply that you might want to consider is an iron. After your stencil has completely dried, usually about 24 hours, it is recommended to iron the back side of the apron, not the side you stenciled, but the other side, to help set the paint on the apron. Be sure to do this once the paint is 100% dry. Again, this is optional, but recommended for best results. Go ahead and get all your supplies ready. We're going to start crafting in just a moment. We're ready to start crafting. You'll see that to protect my clothing, I added a canvas apron that's blank, just to keep the front of my clothing safe. So what I recommend is to start, have your apron out on a flat surface. Ideally, you'll have something underneath your apron to prevent any damage to the surface underneath. Some of the paints may bleed, so it's very important to have something underneath your surface before using your stencil and paint. I like to have my stencil already out of the package. I find that this eliminates hassle and errors when stenciling. You'll see on my stencil that I do have 2 small pieces of regular Scotch tape to help hold my stencil in place. Another recommendation that I have is to have the lid off of your paint and to have a paper towel handy to blot excess paint. Once you're ready to go, what you'll want to do is smooth out the surface of your apron. Make sure that your apron pockets are visible from the front. Place your stencil wherever you would like it to go. For me, I prefer my stencil to be a little bit higher. I'm going to try and center my stencil on my apron. I'm going to use the stitching at the top as a guide to make sure that my stencil is straight. From there, I'm going to drop down just a hair, and then I'll press my tape down to get my stencil in place. Now the fun part, applying paint. To do so, we're going to use the foam brush that's in your packet. I'm going to dab my brush down into the paint until I have almost the entire surface covered. You'll see that the paint is heavier in spots, so using my paper towel, I'm going to blot some of the excess paint off. For me, demonstrating to you, I'm going to start at the bottom of my stencil and work my way up. The reason that I want to do this is because I want to avoid leaning over into wet paint. For you, it may be ideal to start at the top of your stencil and work towards your body. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and I'm going to dab with a little bit of pressure. I want to dab until I see very little canvas color through the stencil. I may need to go back and get more paint, which is okay. I'm going to blot off some excess paint, and I'm going to keep working along my stencil in the same fashion until I see very little canvas through the stencil. If you would like a more solid look, you don't have to blot the paint off of your stencil. You can add it as is for more full coverage to your stencil. I'm going to keep blotting. You'll see that my stencil wants to lift a little bit. That's okay. To prevent that, what I can do is add additional tape to the edges of the stencil. The tape will not hurt the stencil. It is recommended that you use Scotch tape or maybe masking tape rather than Gorilla Tape or duct tape. I'm going to keep going, blotting. You'll see that I'm getting pretty good coverage. One issue that may arise, where I have some small wrinkles in the canvas, you'll see that I might not have the most even coverage. That's okay. We're going to keep stenciling by adding paint to our foam brush and then dabbing. If you have excess paint on your brush and you're using a lot of pressure to dab, be sure that you don't get little specks all over the front of your apron. If you notice that paint is specking as you dab, a good suggestion is to either use less paint or use less pressure. All right, looks like I just have one small section of my apron left to do. If you're noticing that your paint is a little bit runny, you could refrigerate your paint to get it to stiffen up a little bit and then try dabbing on later. My paint was a very good consistency, so it worked very well to get a dab. Now, as we're getting close to the top of the stencil, be very careful not to dab outside of the stencil, or you will have a line running across the top of your apron. Placing some tape, as I did here, can help. However, just a mindful and watchful eye usually is enough. Keep dabbing paint until you have even coverage or coverage that you're happy with. You'll see that I have quite a bit of good coverage here, but I'm taking some of the excess paint off of the stencil and dabbing it into the pattern on the apron. Part of the reason that I'm doing this is I want to make sure that I use the paint that I have. Another reason is it's less paint I'm going to have to wash off the stencil. All right. I feel like I've gotten pretty good coverage. Now here's the moment of truth. I'm going to put my foam brush down on my paper towel so I don't get paint anywhere. And I'm going to slowly peel my stencil off from the side down to the bottom, the other side, and finally at the top. I recommend not setting this down on anything other than your tablecloth, a paper bag, or also paper towels to eliminate transferring paint to a surface you don't want it on. And here's the final project. Once my apron has dried for 24 hours, I'm going to check to make sure the paint is dry by just doing a quick dab test. If I touch the painted surface and I have paint on my finger, I want to leave this on a flat surface to fully dry. Once it is fully dry, and I'm certain by performing a dab or a touch test, I can flip this over on top of maybe a towel or a paper bag and take a low heat iron to the back side of the apron, not the side we stenciled, to help promote setting of the paint. Thanks for joining me for Take and Make Aprons with Attitude. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I hope you have a great craft to show off at all of those upcoming Memorial Day cookouts. Thank you for supporting the Coshocton Public Library, and I hope to see you soon